none of that should have led to his death. It left a family with a great loss and a community with a lot of unanswered questions. Today, we move a step closer to answers. I'm announcing that the Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured indictments against 2 federal officers who shot and killed Bijan Ghaisar. Each officer was indicted separately for 1 count of manslaughter and 1 count of reckless discharge of a firearm. Over the last few months, a special grand jury was planned for and convened at my request for the sole purpose of investigating this matter. Jurors from our community met on a number of occasions to review evidence, and they have returned the indictments that I've sought. This result comes after months of intensive investigative work done by my office. My thanks to the Fairfax County Police Department and FBI for their assistance as well. Special recognition is due to Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney Kyle Manicus and Senior Assistant Commonwealth's Attorney Matt Lowry for their tireless work in securing this indictment. Like so many others in our community, I was deeply disturbed by the images I saw on that cruiser video. That's why I made sure we took a clear and critical look at this case and made sure that we did the right thing. I know so many members of our community, the media, and our elected officials have been inquiring about this case for months. I appreciate their passion and thank them for their patience. I also thank the Ghaisar family for their patience, compassion, and understanding through an unimaginably terrible time. As a community, it's difficult for a process like this to occur without regular updates. But I ultimately decided to pursue this under a sealed special grand jury to provide a total review of the evidence while being mindful of the challenges that we were facing. I wish this could have been done in a faster fashion. However, there are no shortcuts to justice. This is a very complex and nuanced case. The pursuit of these indictments involved a careful review of over 11,000 pieces of documentary evidence, the chasing down of additional evidence, and conducting in-person interviews and discussions in the midst of a global pandemic. Making this more difficult was the U.S. Department of Justice's refusal to produce witnesses for the benefit of our grand jury or our trial. Without our ability to call those witnesses, it rendered their investigation and the valuable evidence they collected unusable at trial. To move this case forward, we had to rely purely on evidence collected by the Fairfax County Police Department. To that end, I want to specifically thank Police Chief Ed Rossler, as well as the officers and detectives that responded that evening and subsequently handled the investigation of this case. It's because of their efforts that we have the foundation necessary to get to today's result. Now, justice has not yet come for the Ghaisar family, but today is a major step forward in that journey. That journey has a number of steps still to go. Because the defendants are federal officers, I fully anticipate that they will file motions to remove this to federal court within the next 30 days. In turn, I also expect the federal government will move to dismiss this case on the grounds of the Supremacy Clause. Because of these unique challenges, we've not only prepared for these indictments, we've also spent months preparing for trial. As I stand before you, I know that we are ready to try this case tomorrow if necessary. The level of preparation that's called for in this case cannot be completed in 6 weeks. It cannot be completed in 6 months. If you are committed to more than just getting an indictment, you need to put in the work, and we've put in that work. Furthermore, in anticipation of federal litigation on removal and Supremacy Clause issues, I've requested the assistance of Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring's office. Attorney General Herring has graciously agreed to partner with us to take the lead on these federal issues. I thank Attorney General Herring for his support in this effort. When this incident occurred, it shook our community, and the reverberations were felt far and wide because of the disturbing video that we've all seen. We live in an age when justice does not happen in a vacuum. Cameras are everywhere and sometimes capture very troubling images. When a case is as widely reported as this one, with video that depicts an unsettling act, our community will certainly demand action. Look around our country right now, and it's clear that many of our neighbors have lost faith in our criminal justice system. That loss of faith is because of systemic failures. We all know that our system needs reform, and that our laws are too often too narrow and very particular. When that happens, it leaves us with laws on the books that don't accord with the values in our hearts. We are fortunate enough that our values and our laws saw eye to eye today. Unfortunately, the fact that it doesn't always play out that way remains a real problem. Let's never forget that we have the power to change that. When we demand better of our elected officials and demand that our laws reflect our values, you'll see better and better outcomes like the one we have today. Who has questions?
Mr. Descano, Shamari Stone from News 4. Are you concerned that the federal officers might assert immunity from state prosecution under the Constitution's supremacy clause?
I anticipate that they would. That's why we did a number of things. Partnering with Attorney General Herring's office, because they have expertise in this type of litigation, puts us on a strong footing. The fact that in that type of supremacy clause argument, we'd have to put on evidence. That's why we're so prepared.
The grand jury came back with this indictment, you're saying, but remember, the Justice Department prosecutors declined to bring criminal charges against the officers. Why do you think that is?
That could be for a number of reasons. I can't guess the reason for the federal decision, but I will say that state law and federal law is very different, and we did not apply federal law, just as the federal government did not apply state law.
And what do you say to the Ghaisar family watching this?
Well, I spoke to the Ghaisar family earlier today, and I will tell them now what I told them before. It's been a long road, but be confident that my office is fighting for you. We're fighting for justice for your son, and we are in this fight for the long haul.
Can you talk about the status of the officers right now? Are they in jail? Were they arrested?
The officers are not in custody. As a result of the indictment, bench warrants have been put out for them. We anticipate that after they are brought before the magistrate, there will be an arraignment the next day.
Is there a manslaughter or voluntary or involuntary manslaughter? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on somebody's foot. Is there a difference between voluntary and involuntary? Did you specify the indictment?
In Virginia law, the charge to go forward on technically is involuntary manslaughter, but they essentially have the same punishments, and the burden of proof is very similar. There is no real distinction in a charging document. As a matter of fact, the only charge to charge in this case would be the involuntary manslaughter under Virginia Code.
Did the FBI cooperate with your investigation?
We had some level of cooperation from the FBI. Of course, that was all within the structures of the limits that were put on them by the U.S. Department of Justice.
Any witnesses?
I can't speak to the witnesses that we put forward in the grand jury, but what I can tell you is that the U.S. Department of Justice has made clear to us that they will not be making federal agents available as witnesses at trial, and did not make them available at grand jury.
You said that you were deeply disturbed by what was shown on that video. What's going through your mind now, knowing that this grand jury came back with the indictment?
One of the reasons that putting in front of a grand jury was so valuable is because we wanted the community to have a chance to have their voice heard. And I feel very good that the community had a chance to have their voice heard, and they determined that there is probable cause for this case to go forward. I'm also feeling a sense that the community can now start to get answers. I've been asked about this case even before I was elected. I know this case is top of mind to the members of this community, and it feels good to know that we're on a path to getting them answers, and that they know that the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office is fighting for justice.
Do you know what the penalties are for the two charges? And also, if you had full cooperation from the feds, do you think you would have been able to bring more severe charges?
Both officers are facing a total of 15 years, 10 years for the manslaughter, and 5 years for the reckless discharge of a firearm. As to speculating on other charges, I won't do that. What I can tell you is that with the evidence that we have available for us to use at trial, we feel comfortable going forward that we made the right decision in terms of what to charge.
Can you clarify, did the grand jury return these indictments today?
The grand jury did return this indictment today.
And you talked about the video, and we've all seen it, but you also said that this case was extremely complex, and it sounds like that you're attributing that to how long this took. But when you look at that video, it seems pretty obvious that the car is moving away from the officers before they fire. So can you square those two things together?
Well, I can't speak about individual pieces of evidence because we have an ethical duty to not do so. What I can tell you is that the case is dynamic and that it is incredibly complex, more complex than one might think at first glance. That level of complexity and nuance will come out as this case moves forward. Are there any other questions?
So there is also a civil suit that's supposed to be taken up next month. What is the latest on that?
I don't have any updates on the civil suit and can't speak to it because it's not something that we're involved with.
Got it. And so was there any new evidence presented to the grand jury that may have swayed their decision?
I'm sorry, with the grand jury being a secret grand jury, I can't discuss what pieces of evidence were put before them. I apologize.
No worries. But you took up this case last year after the federal prosecutors decided not to move forward with the charges. Why is that? Yes, it's extremely windy.
Sorry, I don't know if you would all prefer.
We'll still hear you.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Even though the federal authorities declined to charge the two officers, this was still a crime that occurred, or excuse me, this was still an incident that occurred in Fairfax County. That means that it does come within my jurisdiction. The federal law is different from state law, and I took up this case because I believe that it was necessary for this office to make a decision on whether to move forward or not. I took a look at this, my team and I obviously put a lot of time into it, and our conclusion was that this was a case that should be charged, and the grand jury agreed with us.
And did the family reach out to you?
I have spoken to the family a number of times. As a matter of fact, I first spoke to the family before I even took office, and we have been in contact with their representatives. And I spoke to the family in person earlier this afternoon after the indictment was returned.
How did they react?
Not to put too many words in their mouth. They were very happy. They were very emotional. This has been a long road for them. They felt very pleased that this was a homicide case, that the charges have the potential to hold these officers accountable for the taking of the life of their son. And if I'd be so bold as to say what they told me, they told me that they finally felt that there was somebody fighting for them, and they felt relieved. And I felt relieved that was their feeling.
Do you expect the officers to be arrested, or will they be given the chance to turn themselves in?
My understanding is that they will have the opportunity to turn themselves in.
Does the fact that the shooting actually occurred, as I understand it, on Fairfax County land, not on federal land, is that going to be of significance in the decision where it goes?
That would have been of significance in determining whether it fell under my jurisdiction. Other than that, that would not be dispositive in terms of where it would end up.
And then just to nail down on the like I said, 10 years for manslaughter, the distinction between manslaughter and involuntary. If it was manslaughter and not involuntary, it'd still be 10 years.
In Virginia, it's all manslaughter. It's the same penalty. So the distinction between involuntary and voluntary manslaughter really doesn't exist in Virginia law to any degree that's important.
There is no other charge. Like you say, it's technically called involuntary manslaughter, and there is no other manslaughter charge.
Our other option would have been to charge murder, which I did not feel that we had the evidence sufficient to prevail at trial on. The difference is the intent element for a murder charge. For a murder charge, you would need to prove malice, which essentially is a vengeful heart, a hateful heart. There's not sufficient evidence in my view for that. In my view, the correct charge, and again, the grand jury agreed, is manslaughter.
And so, last question for
Sure.
me. In terms of the protests that we've seen in the last few months, do you think that played a role in swaying the decision with the grand jury?
I can't get in the heads of the grand jurors. So I quite frankly wouldn't be able to give you any answer that's worth anything. I apologize.
No worries. But do you feel like there's more pressure when it comes to social justice these days?
Well, I think as a general matter, social justice and criminal justice reform have become very big topics in our community. It's something that I know the residents of Fairfax County and the residents of Virginia have made of prime importance over the last few months. I can't say and wouldn't imagine that would have any effect on what happened in the grand jury. I have every confidence that the members of our community who served on our grand jury took their charge and reviewed the evidence and let the evidence guide them to come to their conclusion to charge this case.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions, I thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your time.